Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is YAHMAD. Today we're going to be doing a spreadsheets overview and we will be looking at chapter 20, which is data analysis. Okay, so now let's look at cell references. So in Excel, each cell has a reference. So we first have to look at the column letter and then we have to look at the row number. So let's look at this example here. This yellow cell, the reference for this cell will be first of all a column letter, which is B, and then the row number. So the cell reference is B2. The cell reference for this green cell would be the column letter, which is D, the row number, which is 3. So cell reference is D3. Now here we have a range of cells. So more than one cell which has been selected is known as a range. So the range of this cell, of these cells, is G6 colon to G11. It's G6 because we start with the range of cells is in column G and we start from number 6. So G6, and the range finishes at G11. So what we have is the first starting of the range and then the end point of the range. So a range will be typically used when you are calculating values from a number of cells. So for example, you could use a range when you're calculating or adding numbers in a range of cells using a sum function. Okay, we can also define the name of cells. There's two ways of doing this. The first method is if you highlight the cell you want to define the name, right click, select define name, and then enter a new name for the cell. So if I go to this example here, so let's say for example I want to call C2. Instead of referencing as C2, we want to give it a name. So to give it a name, you can right click, select define name, and then we can type in a name for this cell. So now this cell will be known as red. Let's do it again. So this cell, we want to name this cell as green. So right click, define name, green. Okay, if we go back to the PowerPoint, you can also define a name for a range of cells or a table. So let me come to here. It's the same method. So this range would be C4 colon to F4. Okay, so if you were going to reference this range, it starts off as C4 going all the way to F4. Let's say we want to name this range. So you highlight the cells, right click, select define name. Let's call this range yellow. Okay, so now you can see the range of cells is now referenced as yellow. Let's do it one more time. Right click, define name. This time we can call this range of cells blue. Okay, we can also highlight a table. Okay, and we can define the name of the table as well. This is normally used when we are doing lookups. So define a name, and we can call this range of cells shopping. So anytime you highlight this range, you'll see the name will be shopping. Okay, what we can also do is if I highlight this range here, define name, and we can call it prices. So now this range of cell, if you highlight, will be called prices. Okay, so that's how you define a name for a cell. Okay, now let's look at formatting. So formatting is how the cells or the spreadsheet appears. So in formatting, what we can do, we can adjust the columns and the row sizes. We can merge cells together. We can apply currency settings. We can insert border and shading, and also text formatting, including alignment and wrapping. So let me look at this example here. Okay, so we have to apply appropriate formatting to the spreadsheet. The first thing I'm going to do, basically, let's look at here. I want to delete any cell, any rows or columns which we don't need. Okay, so to delete rows, so I need to delete these two rows. This row here, so you can highlight on a number, you can delete, you can also insert by clicking on insert. Okay, once I've done that, I'm just going to click in between to see all of the information. So if you click between D and E, we can open up the cells, okay, to ensure all of the information is shown fully. Okay, so what we can do, we can highlight like this, and we can open like this as well. And then we can also click on the rows if you double click between a number to show all of the cells in full. Okay, now the first thing we're going to do, if I go back to my question, I'm going to merge the cells. So the cell will be merged from A to B, and the text will be aligned to the left. And also we have to shade this cell. So if I go back to here, I'm going to increase the size. You can also right click and click on row height and type in something specific if you wanted to. So if I typed in 30, that would be also increasing the size. So now let's merge. So I can right click. I think the best way to merge would be up here actually. Merge cells. Okay. I want to increase the size of this title here. And then let's shade this cell a particular color. Okay. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. The next thing I'm going to do is, so I've already adjusted the columns and rows to make sure all of the information is shown. I'm going to now insert the border and a shading for the top row. So if I go back to here, so to apply a border we can click here, all borders. Okay, I'm going to delete this column here which is not necessary, and now I'm going to apply shading to this top row. So, and if I zoom in a little bit, you'll notice the text is wrapping, is coming underneath itself. So let's now make the title, or the first row, bold and format the text so it wraps. Okay, so I'll increase the size as well. Now to make the text wrap, what we can do is, let me just select Arial, drop the size. If I right click and select format cells, so when it loads up I can click on alignment and I can click on this option to wrap the text. It's not going to work unless you increase the row size, and then what we can do is decrease the column size to ensure the text is now wrapping and comes underneath itself. Okay. And what we can also do is change the formatting of the cell. So if I right click again, the alignment vertical or horizontally. So we can align the text to be center and maybe center horizontally as well. So as you can see, the text is centrally aligned horizontally and also vertically as well. So again, let me just increase the size. Now what we're going to do is format this text as all the same font size. So 10, Calibri, black. Okay. Let's have a look what else we can do. I don't know why I keep clicking on that. So we've adjusted the column size. Okay. We've applied some borders and shading. We've merged some cells. We've formatted the text including alignment and wrapping. Now we're going to apply the currency to this cell here. So if I highlight this cell here, we can either click on here to apply some currency. Okay, or if you need to find something specific, we can right click and click on number, currency, and then you can find a specific currency to apply. So you can have a look at the different types of currencies. Okay, you also have codes which you can insert as well if you can't find the currency you're looking for, the symbol. Okay, so that's simple formatting. I'll show you a few more things. If I highlight the titles and if we go to alignment, if you can also vertically align the text by simply dragging this box like this, and you can see if I increase, now the text has been vertically aligned. Okay, we can change it again to change the direction of the text. If I drag this down, and you can see the text direction has been changed as well. So that's simple formatting. Okay, we can also do additional things just before we do move on. If we right click, format cells, we can change the amount of decimal places. Okay, it's dates and time formatting as well. Okay, so there's lots of different options we can follow. Okay, so now let's look at some tips. So when you are formatting, you can format a number in numerous ways, including using the method shown on the left. So you can format a set of decimal places. You can format a number into a percentage or into a fraction. Okay. When you are formatting values into currency, you might use the option at the top, in particular, to format into currency. However, sometimes what happens is, if I go back to PowerPoint, is it may display a value as a dash. So 0 may be displayed as a dash if you're using this method here. So what you need to do is, if you right click and go to currency, this will change it into 0.00. So if you select this option here, what tends to happen is, if I go back to here, and let's say if it changes to 0, it's appearing as a dash. That's because I've clicked up here and the setting has been changed to accounting. What you need to do is make sure you select currency. Okay, or what you can do is click on right click, format cells, and select currency from this option here. So if it's shown as accounting, you might see a dash. So my advice would be to change that to currency instead. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So hide and show columns and rows. So you can click on a column header and you can click on hide. Then you can click in between to unhide rows and columns, and to also insert and delete is very straightforward. So let me show you. So if I want to delete this row here, you right click on the number 6 and you can click on delete. If I want to insert a row, you can right click and click on insert. Okay, I'll just delete that. If I want to insert a column, I can click on insert and then I can click on delete. If I want to hide and show the row and columns, what you need to do is select the columns you want to hide. So let's say I want to hide these two columns, C and D. You right click and you can click on hide. If I want to show the columns again, I click on the letters in between the ones I've hidden, so B and E, and then right click and select unhide. Again, I can do the same for the rows. Let's say I want to hide the rows 6 and 7. Okay. And then if I want to show that row, I click in between, so 5 and 8, right click and unhide. Okay. So you might have to hide in columns of rows if you're printing and you don't want to print certain parts of the spreadsheets. For example, the spreadsheet paper will be very specific if they want you to hide any content. Okay, so merging cells, we looked at merging cells, so you can highlight the cell range, then you can click at the option at the top. Okay, so let's say, for example, I wanted to merge these cells here. You can click here to merge the cell into one cell. Okay, and if you want to unmerge, you can click on this option again, and now it becomes individual cells instead. Okay, and shading and formatting, again, to insert a color is quite straightforward, but sometimes they may ask you to insert a pattern and then a color. Okay, so you may be asked to put a specific pattern into a cell. You can do this by right clicking your mouse and selecting the fill option. You can then select the pattern and the color. So if I go back to Excel, so let's say, for example, we don't want a color here, we want a particular pattern instead. So what you can do, you can right click, format cells. If I go to fill, I can select a color for the background, for example, and then a color for the pattern or pattern style. Okay, so background color, let me select the background color, dark gray, and then you can have stripes, for example. So the pattern color could be set. So can you see the stripes are red, and then the background color, let's make the background color yellow, so you can adjust this as well accordingly. So but obviously what you want to do is make sure if you have text in that cell, you want to choose appropriate colors which will not take too much attention away from the text. Okay. But now we're going to be looking at inserting headers and inserting footers. So if I want to insert a header and footer, okay, what you need to do is click on Insert, Header, and then this is the header. If you click on footer, oops, if I click on this one, sorry, this option here, go to footer, you go to the footer of the page. If I click back up here, you can go to the head of the page, and you can insert your name if you wanted to. So YAHMAD, need to spell my name right. Maybe you want to insert the time, maybe you want to insert the date, and then if I go to the footer, maybe you want to insert the page number in the center. Now to escape the header and footer, you need to click on any cell, then you click on View and Normal. Okay. If you go to the top, click on File and Print Preview, to show Print Preview, you'll notice your name and the header details appears on every page at the top, and then we can see the page number appears at the bottom of every page. Okay, so to show you again, if you want to insert a header, you go to Insert, Header and Footer. This is the header. To go to the footer, you click here. To go back to the header, you click on Go to Header. Okay, so now we're going to be moved on to creating graphs. So to create a graph, what you'd have to do is highlight the cells that would be required to create a chart. Okay, then you have to select the correct chart, so a bar or pie or line chart. Okay, then you can add labels to your axes by using the select data options. Okay, so a graph is used to visually display data which is easy to read and interpret. So here's an example of a graph, if I zoom in. So as you can see, this graph is showing mobile phone sales. Okay, so it's comparing mobile phone sales for iPhone 6 and Samsung S5. So this is a legend. So then we have the axis labels as well. So we have the month along the bottom, and then we have the number of sales going along the side here. So when you are making a graph, a bar chart in particular, you need to make sure you have a title, you display the axis labels, okay, and then sometimes the question says to show the legend or to delete the legend. So make sure you know which one you're looking at. So if I come to Excel, let's quickly make a graph. So I'm going to make a graph to compare the sales from these months here. So first of all, you highlight the range. If you click on Insert, Column, and because we're comparing two values, you want to select this option here. So what you can do, you can click on the bars, and if you want to change the colors, if you go to is it Design? No, let's go to Home, and then you can select a color from the paint bucket, and then let's select this color here. Okay, so this is a legend. If you want to delete the legend, you can right click and delete the legend. Okay, now what we need to do is just change these values here so they're matching with the month. So if I right click and click on Select Data, so you can see the horizontal values are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I click here, these values, and then click on this option here, refer to the months. Okay, so if I highlight the months and then click OK, you can see the numbers have been replaced by the months now. Okay, so now we need to insert. If I click on Layout, if you're using a newer version of Office, you can select Quick Layouts number 9. But I'm going to insert a title using an older version of Excel. So a chart title. So what was the title again? Mobile phone sales. And then we want to insert a title for each axis. So this axis here will be the month. And then I need to show a label for the vertical axis, which will show me the number of sales. Okay, and sometimes you may have to create a graph and you may have to copy and paste it into a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document. Okay. I'm going to make another type of chart now. So if you're asked to make a chart to show percentages, you normally would use a pie chart. So I'm going to create a chart showing the values as percentage. So for iPhone 6, we want to compare the sales from January going all the way to June, and we want to show the values as a percentage. So now we're going to make a pie chart. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the numbers here. So what we need to do first of all is right click, select the data, and then we want to click on edit and highlight the months. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to increase the January sales, so it's got a line share, it's got a majority share of the pie chart. Okay, so as you can see now, the January sales is 100, is taking the majority. Now to add labels to a pie chart, you can right click, you can click on select, or actually let me do that again. If I click on a pie chart, if you click on add data labels, and then if you right click again and select format data labels, maybe you can select the percentage, as you can see. If you click on category name, maybe the month as well. And sometimes what you may have to do is pull out the biggest chunk. So if you double click, you can pull out the biggest chunk. And again, if you want to color in, you can color in the pie chart, or you can make it into grayscale if you want to as well. Okay, so the pie chart is normally used when we want to show percentages. Okay, a bar chart would be used normally when we're having to compare two sets of values. So as you can see, this bar has now been increased to 100 because I've changed the value here. If I change it back to, or change it to a lower value, you'll see the pie chart has been decreased. Okay, so for example, this is now not the biggest chunk, it's April. So we can double click and we can drag this out if necessary. Okay, so if we go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so let's look at the use of formulas. So formulas can be typed into a formula bar to work out simple calculations. So a formula would begin with the equal sign. You need to refer to the cell reference before you write your formula. Okay, you can either type the cell reference or click on the cell. So you can create simpler formulas, and we can use the add to add, the star to multiply, the minus sign to subtract, and the slash to divide. Even if you update the numbers in the cell, the formula will automatically work out a new value. So if I come to here, okay, let's look at these formulas here. So I've done the first one already. So it's basically this cell here, which is C15 plus C16. Okay, so let's do this one here. So you start off with equals, and then I can either type in F15 or I can click on F15 and then minus this cell here, which is F16. Okay, to multiply, again we select the cell, or you can type it in, and then you click on star and then multiply. Division, I've done it for some reason, but I'll do it again. So equal this cell divided by 5. Okay, and then plus again, I'll quickly do it, plus this cell, and finally let's multiply this cell by 7. Now if you click, let's say if I click here, let's show you this one. If you double click on the formula, it shows you the cells which have been used, and you can see C15 is blue and the outline of this cell is blue, C16 is green, and the outline of this cell is green. So it basically tells you by color as well which cell you're referring to. Okay, so that's using simple formulas. Okay, now this question came up in a recent examination, November 2017. We had to use a formula to copy the value held in another cell. So we had to replicate the formula for each destination. So in this example, the destination was shown here, and what I did was I typed in equals and then the name of the cell that contains the destination. So we basically had to use a formula to copy the value held in B4. So the formula would be equal and then the name of the cell reference. Okay, so values can be replicated from another cell by typing in equals and then the cell reference. Just before I go back to here, just let me go back to the formulas, I just forgot to mention, because we have the formulas in place now, if I was to change this value to 2, for example, automatically the formulas will change or work out the new value. So you're not having to enter a different calculation every time. If I wanted to divide 200 by 5, it gives me the updated answer. So that's the advantage of using formulas, because you don't have to change the calculation every time. If it was done manually, the formula will automatically work out the new value. Okay, so let me do this example. Let me replicate the contents of this cell range here using a formula. So we're not going to copy and paste. If I click on equal and then click on Samsung, which is in N3, and press enter, this will change to Samsung S3 as well. If I was to change this to S6, this automatically changes to whatever the content is that's appearing in this cell here. And then you can replicate. If you go to the corner and you see the black cross, you can use the autofill to drag this down. And this is relative cell referencing. So basically, this is relative to this position here. So if I was to change this to just a note 3, obviously this here would change and take up the contents of the cell shown here. Okay, so that's your simple formulas. That's using a formula to replicate contents of a cell. Now we're going to be using that, looking at using simple functions. Okay, so when you're using functions, you're normally referring to a range of cells. So the cell range for the total for January sales would be this range here. Okay, so it would be this cell, this cell, this cell, and this cell. Okay, the cell range for the total average, okay, monthly sales would be this range of cells here. So we want to work out the average in this cell here. So let's look at the different functions. So equal sum basically is used to calculate the total sum of the numbers within the range. So let's say, for example, this number 44 is all of these numbers added up together. Equal average is, or we'll calculate the average of the numbers within the range. So let's say, for example, if you type in equal average and then you highlight the range, it will work out the average. Okay. The equal min function will find the lowest number in the range. So as you can see here, we have 5, which is the lowest number within this range, and then the max function will find the highest number in the range. So the highest number is Samsung S5, which is 18. So functions are pre-defined formulas and are already available in Excel. So that each function has a specific role. So if I come back to here again, okay, I'm just going to delete this pie chart. Let me just put the borders in and just let me format this really quickly. Okay. So if I want to find out the total of this range of cells, what I need to do is click on equal sum, or click on this cell here and type in equal sum. Adds all the numbers in a range of cells. So equal sum, and then you want to highlight the range of cells you want to add from. So it's going to be from B6 to G6. Enter. And then what we can do, we can drag this down to this point here. So this is all relative. So if I click on here, it's looking up in this range here. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to increase the size like that. So you can see it's looking up this range here, just hidden behind here. Okay. If I wanted to work out the average, so type in equal average. Okay. And then again, we highlight the range of cells we want to work out the average from. Okay, so we're looking in this range here. So again, it starts from B6 colon all the way to G6. And then we can drag this down. Let's say I wanted to format to show only one decimal place. We can right click, format cells, number, one decimal place, or no decimal places. We can also use functions to do this later, which I'll show you. To change the decimal place, you can also use this option here. But normally when you are formatting decimal place, you will use the round and round up and round down in integer functions, which we'll do later on. Again, I want to work out a total. Okay, sales in January. So if I type in equal sum, highlight the range, so from B6 to B9, press enter, and then I can replicate this by, if I go to the corner, I can drag this across. So this is relative, so if I click on here, it's basically relative to this position now, so it's adding up the values from this range here. And then equal max will find the highest number, returns the largest value in a set of values. Okay, so equal max, we want to look up in this range here, we can close a bracket. If you press enter, it automatically closes the bracket for you. Again, we can use the autofill function if you go to the bottom corner and you can drag to here. Again, it's relative to its position. And then min will find the lowest number within the range. So if I type in equal min, highlight from here, so I'm expecting to see 5. Yeah, and then we can drag this across as well. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at absolute cell referencing. So we looked at relative cell referencing. Relative is basically according to its position. If I go back to here, so this is the position of the range is relative to the position of this cell. So when I replicated it, it moved across. So for example, this one is now relative to this position. This range of cells is relative to this cell here. I didn't lock anything into place. Okay, so absolute cell referencing is the opposite, is where you have to lock something into place. So let's look at this example here. So when you use autofill to duplicate a formula into cells below, okay, then you must use absolute cell referencing, because what's happening in this formula here, if I zoom in, we are multiplying the price by this percentage here, which is in this cell here. So the percentage is in E3. Okay, so B6 is relative, so when you do drag it down, it's going to change from B6 to B7, B8, B9, B10. What we don't want to change is this cell reference here. So if I replicate this formula and I don't use absolute cell referencing, this will change into E4, E5, E6 and E7, and it's not going to work. So we need to use absolute cell referencing to lock this cell into place. So absolute cell referencing will lock in a particular cell. To absolute cell reference, you must insert $sign before the letter and the number. So some keyboards you can use Fn and F4 or Shift and F4 function to use absolute cell referencing. So if I do use absolute cell referencing, all the prices would be multiplied by this percentage which is stored here. So the price is relative referencing, so when a formula is dragged down, the formula references to the next price. So this will reference to B7 and so forth. In the example to the left, if you do not use absolute cell referencing on the 25%, then the price will be multiplied against the contents in cell E4. Okay, so if this is not locked in, it's going to multiply against staff discount, which is not a value. Okay, so let me show you an example. Okay, let me zoom in. So let me just first of all format this into currency. So what I want to do, I want to work out the discount. So to work out a discount, I need to multiply this price by 10%, which is held in the cell here. Okay, in C3. I'm purposely going to make a mistake and you'll see what happens. So the first cell has worked. If I double click, it references to B6 and C3. However, if I drag this down, we have an issue. It says value. Why do we have value? So the first part is in the right place. Is looking at this price now is relative to this position. However, this cell here has moved down to this cell here, which contains text. So you can't multiply this to this value. So that's why it's giving you this error message. So what you should do to resolve this issue is lock in a 10%. So let me show you again. Click on B6 multiplied by 10%. So like I said, normally on some keyboards you can type in Fn and F4, Shift and F4. Because I'm recording, for some reason it doesn't allow me, so you need to put a $sign before the letter and then the number. Okay, so now if I replicate this formula down by dragging down on the dark black square in the bottom right corner, you see it works. So if I click on any cell, so now B9 is relative to this price here. However, C3, which contains 10%, has been locked into place. So let me show you again. So if I want to work out the staff discount, which is now 25%, we multiply this price by this value here. If I don't lock into place, this will move down, which we don't want. We want to keep that percentage in the same place. So I can put $sign before the E and before the number 3. And then we can drag this down. Okay, so again, the price is relative to this position here. Okay, however, the 25% has been locked into place. So look at the color. So this refers to this cell here, which has a blue border, and this refers to this cell here, which has the green border. So that's absolute cell referencing. Okay, well now we're going to be using, looking at using count and count A. Okay, so if you use equal count, this function will count the cells within the range that contains only numbers here. So in this example here, we have a range of cells, okay, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers within this range. So you only use count when you count in numbers only. Okay, so if I go to the example, so if I want to count the numbers, I use count. So if I click on equal count, counts the number of cells in a range that contains numbers. So if I highlight this range here, so C3 to C14 and close, we should see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I type in another number, that should go to 7. If I type in a letter, it will still stay 7 because we're only counting numbers. Okay. Now the next function is the count A. Okay, so this function will count all the cells within the range that are not empty. So basically counts a cell which contains letters, numbers, a combination of letters and numbers, symbols, anything. So if the cell is empty, it will not count. So if I go back to here, we want to use count A here because we're not counting numbers anymore. Okay, so if I type in count A, counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So if I highlight this range here, oops, let me do that again, equal count A, so if you double click to open a bracket, and then you highlight the range, and then you can close the bracket. So I expect to see 12, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now if I delete a nationality, then you should see it goes down to 11. If I type in a number, it still counts the number. If I type in a dash, okay, it still counts that. Okay, so it's basically counting the cell unless it's empty. Okay, so let's count the fruits. So again, we can use count A. Okay, because we're counting the cells which contains text values, and then we can close the bracket. So within the brackets, you include the range of cells you want to add or count from. Okay. Now we're going to be using count if. Okay, so the count if function has two parts: the range and then the criteria. So this function will count the number of cells which contains a specific criteria from the range. So for example, we need to count the Prada bags from this range here. So we have a range of handbags, and we're only looking to count Prada. So as you can see, we've got 1, 2 bags for Prada. Okay, so we're going to use a count if. Sometimes you may have to count all the cells apart from a criteria, but that's the second part. So if I come back to here, this example, let's do this here. So what we want to do, we have a specific criteria. I want to count in this range all of the nationalities which are Qatari. So there's two ways of doing this. So if I use count if, because we're looking for criteria, counts the number of cells within the range that meets a given condition. So count if. Then you got two parts. So if I click up here, the first part is the range. So I know my criteria is Qatari. So I need to first of all highlight the range, and the range will normally include the criteria. And then if I type in comma, I can either write in speech marks Qatari, Okay, so this will work, and this should give me 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the answer. Okay, or I can reference to a cell. So if I click on count if, okay, the range is again where you see the criteria. So see French within this range here, comma, and this time I'm going to click on this cell as a reference. Okay, and what I'm expecting to see is 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I'll quickly do Spanish as well. So again, we're counting the criteria. We highlight the range of cells we need to look into, comma. So now we're on criteria. So always follow the formula. So now the criteria has become bold, and I can highlight Spanish. So we've got 1, 2, which matches up here. Okay, so the second example is sometimes you may have to count all the cells apart from certain criteria. In this example, we want to count all the brands apart from Marc Jacobs. So what you type in equal count if, highlight the range, and then we have to use the less than more than sign as a not than Marc Jacobs, and it has to be within the speech marks. Okay, so now we can't reference to a cell. So if you don't want to count something, we need to use this information here. So in speech marks, less than, more than, then the criteria. Okay, so if I go to here, let's say we want to count everything apart from apple, so not apple. So if I type in equal count if, we're still using count if because we have a criteria. We highlight the range of cells, comma. Okay, then in speech marks, less than, more than, apple, and then close the speech marks, close the brackets. Before I press enter, what I'm expecting to see is we expect to see the number of cells which does not contain apple. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so if I delete this cell here and type in, so now we have 8 cells which do not contain apple. Okay, so if you are doing a count if, you can either write the criteria within a speech mark, or you can refer to a range of cells. Okay, what you can also do is, if I look at this example here, so let's say we're looking for the year, so year which is greater than or equal to 2012. So again, we can type in equal count if, you can highlight the range, comma, and then for the criteria within the speech marks, we can type in greater than or equal to, and then whatever the criteria is going to be. So in this example, 2012. So okay, let's see if it was on the other example. Actually, I did that one. Okay, so let's just summarize. So equal count, this will count a range of cells which only includes numbers. So it will not count letters, it will only count cells which contains numbers. Count A, okay, let me just delete that, don't know why I've got that. So equal count A, this will count all of cells which are not empty. So count A will basically count cells which contains letters and numbers or symbols. Okay. Count if will count a range of cells which includes a specific criteria. You can also use the not function. So if you want to count everything apart from something, again we use count if because we're looking at specific criteria. If you're using a not function, this will count everything apart from that specific criteria. So here we have some examples. If I want to count all the books, I can use count A. The book names will normally be in text. If I want to count the number of sales from Virgin, remember we're not adding, we want to count. So it's a count if, and then criteria can be Virgin. Okay, sales from Amazon, it's the same thing, but we've highlighted the range. But instead of referencing or writing the name in a speech marker, we can reference to a cell. And then this example will count everything apart from H and V from the same range of cells. So when you reference to a criteria, you can either write the criteria in speech marks, or you can reference to a cell that contains the criteria. Okay, so how do you know when to use a count function in an exam? So sometimes they'll tell you clearly. So here it says use a countif function in cell C7 to count a number of products made by the supplier with a code that matches the contents of cell B7. Okay, so in this example here, it tells you to use a countif to count a number of products. Okay, so that's a range, and then we have a criteria which is in another column. Okay, so this is where we're counting with a criteria which is in another column. So this would be an example of using a countif. Okay, this example here, use a function to count the number of trips to a destination where the decode column matches the contents of cell B2. Okay, again, this will be a countif because we have a range of cells which has to match up to the criteria which will be in another column. Okay, in this question here, in cell B11, use a function to count the number of item codes. Now you'd have to look at what is in the item codes. If the item codes are made up just of numbers, then you can use equal count. If the item codes are made up of letters and numbers, you can use equal count to A. There's no other criteria to look at, so in the other cells or questions we had to match the contents to a specific criteria. In here we're just counting all of the item codes. So the only thing you need to work out is, does the item code contain letters and numbers, text. So if it contains text values, then you use count A. If it contains only numbers, then you can use count. Okay, we're going to be now looking and doing this first example. So I'll come to my Excel here. So the question is, we're going to be looking at question 5. Use a count function. So we can use a count A, countif. So we need to work out which one. In cell K7, which is this cell here, to count the number of products made by the supplier with a CC code that matches the contents of cell J7. So basically, the contents of this cell has to match up with the range here. So because we have a criteria in another cell, we're going to use a countif function. So if I type in countif, now the range is here in supplier. Okay. Now, if I read the rest of the question, okay, this function must include both absolute and relative referencing. Because I'm going to be replicating this function, okay, down, I don't want this supply code to move. This supply code has to stay in the same position. So I need to put a dollar signs in. So again, you can either use a shortcut keys on your keyboard, F1, F4, or Shift and F4. So that's the range that's going to be locked into one place, comma, and the CC code has to match with the supplier. So then if I click on here, this will be relative referencing, because when I drag it down, if I'm in this cell, we're going to look in this cell for the CC code to see how many times it appears here, and then it's going to count that value. I'm going to close the bracket. So A must appear 6 times in this range here. Okay, if I replicate this formula down, you can see the most popular code is K, which appears 10 times within this range here. Okay, so that was that question. So that was a countif. Okay, the next question is, we want to count a number of trips to a destination. Again, we need to use another column which matches with the contents of cell B2. So now that's this example here. Okay, so slightly different, but let's have a look. This question here, in cell D3, use a function to count the number of trips to the destination where the decode, okay, this range here, column matches the contents of cell J3. Oh, sorry, matches the contents of cell C3, not J. Okay, so basically this code will match up to this column range here. Okay, so every time it matches up, it's going to count the value. So because again we have a criteria, we're going to use a countif. Okay, so the range is basically, we want to count the number of trips to the destination where the value in decode, so that's the range. Okay, again, we're going to be using absolute cell referencing here because we don't want for this range to move in any different position, so I'm going to type in a $sign. Okay, and basically the column matches this contents in cell 3. So in cell C3 we have BRA. So anytime we see BRA, it's going to basically count that value every time it appears in that range. So if I press enter, so BRA must appear 13 times, IND appears 14, and USA appears 8 times in this range here. Okay, now the last question was we wanted to count the number of items. So if I go back to the question, so the question was in cell B11 use a function to count the number of item codes in this invoice. You know, so if you look at the Excel, the first thing I said is we don't have a criteria, so we know we're not going to use a count if. Okay, so the item codes are down here. Now I said we first would have to identify if the item codes are a combination of letters and numbers or text. So as you can see here, the item codes are a combination of letters and numbers. So we're going to have to use a count A function. Okay, basically counting a number of cells in a range that are not empty. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 different item codes. If I press enter, I should expect to see 5. So that's the correct answer. Okay, so make sure if you are doing these questions, you are underlining the key parts of the question. So you count or you underline basically what you're counting, okay, made by the supplier. And then also if there's a matching cell, you identify which cell will be used as a criteria. So in this case it was this cell here, okay, looking in this range here. In this example here we were matching the contents of this cell to the criteria here.